Washington's heading down to the library. It's time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Rome Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars Hanson, it's time for our weekly keys to the game. I know we always have fun on this show every single week. I want to say, like, we had somebody, I think it was on Twitter last week, who said, I listened to your keys to the game for Arizona State, and I knew it was going to be like a tough game because of the way you guys talked about it. It's like, dude, we talk this way about every single game. Like every single game, we make the most outlandish predictions sometimes. When they hit, hey, good for us. So with that being said, what are some of Washington's offensive keys to the game against the Stanford Cardinal?
Yeah, well, I think the offense was due for a clunker, right? Especially, it was the perfect letdown, rainy, late night, Arizona State's always the one that's going to get you sort of thing. And similar with Stanford, where you're going on the road, down to the library in Palo Alto, it's like, okay, you got to bring your own energy. We've talked about that at nauseam this week. So the first key for the offense is just to get the offensive line settle the offense down, just kind of get some points in the first half to where you're like, okay, we're out of the funk. I'm not saying you got to light it up for 28 or 35. I mean, if you do, great. But I think if it's if it's 17-7 at half, I wouldn't be surprised. If it's 14-7, I wouldn't be surprised. That's not an indictment on like how UW and Stanford are going to be doing. It could be like a blowout in yardage, but it just seems like that UW doesn't have the same level of firepower to get to those 28, 35, point first halves. I mean, they've only had a couple of them, right? The Michigan State one,
right?
And Cal.
Yeah.
I mean, Boise State and Tulsa, when you're at home, it doesn't necessarily count. And Cal is kind of the same way. So when you're on the road, you've really only had one, and it's at Michigan State. I don't necessarily think Stanford.
In fairness, this is only the third road game of the year, though.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, right, cherry picking a little bit, but it's like, but still, yeah. But it matters, right? Because when you say, oh, hey, well, what about at home? It's like, well, home and away, there is a difference, right? So when you're going on the road, especially to an environment that is so dead, you really have to bring all your own energy for this game. This is kind of a good prove-it game for the offense. So if you can get, 17-21 in the first half and then 14 points or 21 points in the second half, that's how I would expect to do it versus blow them out in the first. Because we've seen Stanford come back from a blowout in the first half. So it's almost better to not blow Stanford out in the first half and kind of just make it two half of a game.
Right. And I like where you're going with that, because that was kind of my thing. And I'm going to rehash this when we talk about the defense too, but it really is all about setting the tempo early. Right. And I think that a great way to do that would just be a couple of explosive plays. And, it's something we've heard about a little bit over the course of this week. Some of the coaching staff talked about it. It sounds like Julius Buelow is probably going to be able to play against Stanford, and he'll probably slot it right back into the starting lineup, which does shore up the offensive line a little bit. And then the same thing with Jalen McMillan at wide receiver, where I wouldn't be surprised if they roll him out on a limited snap count, where it's still just kind of like, okay, let's test you. Let's see how you're doing. We don't want to just bring you back cold for USC, kind of like we did against Oregon. Then you got hurt just a couple plays into the game. And like that just is really tough and takes you out of the rhythm a little bit. So if they roll him out for 20, 25 snaps, but you see some of those snaps really early on, right? Where it's, okay, yeah, now we can have our full complement of offensive weapons out there and just maybe, hit a couple of quick strikes, whatever it is, to just get the offense in rhythm. Because one thing that I don't know how big of a deal you want to make of it, but that probably didn't necessarily help things in the Arizona State game, is that something that Ryan Grubb said on Monday is that Michael Penix was playing a little bit under the weather, where who knows how sick he really was. We don't really want to speculate, but that could have also been something that played into just kind of the offensive poor performance. So if your quarterback is, pulling a Michael Jordan-esque flu game out there, like that's not easy in the rain and the cold of Arizona State or playing Arizona State in Seattle on a rainy Saturday night. So that's something that probably plays into that a little bit as well. So making sure that everything is just kind of healthy and just kind of down pat, I would say is the best way to put it, before. And I know I keep saying we shouldn't look ahead here, but before the USC game and this just absolutely brutal November the Huskies have is very important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to set that November up, you want to win all those games, and it doesn't matter how you win them. It just matters that you win them. So I think getting through Stanford is really all you have to do. You don't have to put up the greatest style points. I mean, yes, you would like to, but the win matters more than how you got there. Because as we're going to talk about later on in the season, as the college football playoffs rankings come out and teams play each other, those two Big Ten teams are going to knock each other out at some point. So it's like, as long as you keep winning, you're okay. And if you have only one loss and every other Pac-12 school has two losses or one loss, you're going to be the best one-loss team of that, especially given who they're going to play in the month of November.
So this is a tangent. This isn't really on our schedule, but I just want your quick 30-second thoughts on this. Well, what do you think would happen if Oregon State and Washington State just rule every other team ineligible for the Pac-12 championship this year?
God, that would. I mean, I can't compress my thoughts on that in 30 seconds, so I'm just gonna say, like, I would be very surprised if that were to become the case. But I mean, I guess beat him in Corvallis, and that might solve a couple of problems.
That's fair.
Like, even though
But
even though you don't have them winning in Corvallis.
I don't. And hey, I'm going to hold true to that just because
Same, same.
it's a possibility.
No, it is.
It's
It is.
that's all. I know we've had that debate 100 times on the show, and we'll have it 100 more. But no, one other thing that I really wanted to talk about is it just, oh man, my light's falling down here. We're having a wonderful podcast. But one thing that I also want to talk about is establishing the running game. And I know it's something we talk about a lot. We talk about ad nauseum week in and week out. But it felt like Dylan Johnson had a lot of momentum just coming into the Arizona State game after two really great performances against Arizona and Oregon, and then kind of lost all of it, right? So I think that that's something where I don't know if you want to do it early, especially if Jalen McMillan does end up playing, but just finding ways to get him really involved and just letting him maybe get back over 100 yards, have him get 20, 25 carries. But it's kind of thing where maybe you want him to run behind Julius Buelow and establish that confidence there, because that's something that we talked about earlier in the week is Washington just kind of needs to get his groove back and get its confidence back offensively. And that's a really great way to do it, is just reestablishing the running game, just saying, yeah, it struggled a lot last week, but hey, it's back. It's not, it's not Oregon's rushing attack. It's one of the best in the country, but it's solid. It's good enough to open things up for Michael Penix. So I think that's something that would be fun to watch, or just important to watch really this weekend as well.
Right. Well, I mean, we saw it against Oregon, right, where Dylan Johnson didn't have a ton of carries, but when he did, he was hitting holes with conviction. And I think that's really all you need from the running backs. Like every other play, or maybe, I mean, we saw it a couple of times against Arizona State where they would do consecutive runs, and one would be like a 8 or 9 yard gain, and then one would be a 3 yard loss. So it's like, okay, maybe you don't necessarily go to the well back to back, but just, get Dylan some touches, maybe even get Will Nixon some touches. Just allow the offensive line to set the run game tempo so they get more confidence when it comes to pass blocking. Because when you're run blocking, you're just going straight downhill. There's no back step. You're literally going forward. When you're passing all the time, you're like, okay, now you're basically in defense mode, right? Where you're like, okay,
Right.
now we're taking 2 steps back before we're getting a block on. So that's with every pass offense and every run offense, right? That's just how the pass blocking, run blocking works. So I think, actually, to your point, I would almost rather see those runs come early so the offensive line can get that confidence, because I don't think Stanford's going to blow you off the ball the way Arizona State did. And this isn't the old Stanford team. This isn't the old Stanford defense where you had Solomon Thomas and guys like that could just blow you off the ball and were game wreckers. Not that it's not a capable defense, but it's certainly not a defense, and especially a defensive front, that should threaten Washington the way Arizona State did.
No, absolutely. And before I move on to the defense, we're going to take a quick break here because it's now time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing. Much like Rome Odunze, who's just been a game wrecker all season long, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good, just like Rome Odunze, who has just been one of the best wide receivers in all of college football this season. Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. They're fit for all times, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable, like watching a big game or your kids' game, tackling work, or working out, or really, truly just anything else. And you can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout, 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. And Lars, there are only 2 home games left this season. And if people want to just buy tickets without the stress, best way to do that is on Game Time, because you shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next big event. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's super easy to use. And some of the great things about it, like I said, last-minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, they're all different kinds of deals. Lowest price guaranteed. There's event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all kinds of different things to make sure you have the best ticket buying experience. Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even up to an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. And with the Game Time guarantee, that means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Now to move on to the defensive side, because we talked about it a little bit earlier in the week. Washington's defense had arguably its best game of the year against the Stanford Cardinal. So what are you looking to see from them against the Stanford offense?
Well, I think the one thing that's unique about the Stanford offense, and I know we touched on it early on in the week, is they have more of not a 2-quarterback system per se, but they have multiple different kinds of quarterbacks, right? I believe I want to get this correct here, so I'm trying to look it up really quick. But their main starter is more of not a running quarterback, but more of a threat as a runner. I believe it's Ashton Daniels, right? Is the one that's the runner?
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to
it's hard to keep track with that 2 QB system they use.
Yeah, so I mean, he hasn't gotten a ton of yards, but he's attempted 50 rushes for 85 yards. So it's not necessarily that it's worked or that's kind of their main bread and butter, like what Andrew Luck used to do and things like that. But Justin Lamson isn't necessarily as much of a runner, although he actually does have more yards and more touchdowns. So both of them have the ability to run. And so I think that for Washington, which has always kind of been their Achilles heel, right? Taking away the running threat of a dual threat quarterback and forcing him to be a pocket passer, because certainly when you look at their passing numbers, it's nowhere near what it should be in terms of what you would traditionally expect from a Stanford offense. I mean, yeah, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions combined, but only 1,600 yards. Opponents are throwing for 2,200 yards against Stanford. So it's a matter of, okay, they're not that capable of an offense from just a quarterback perspective. I mean, if you have 2, you have none, right? That's kind of the tradition of how that goes. But they've shown that they've been able to be a capable offense. So it's a matter of, can you just force them to be one-dimensional, force them into just being a passing offense, and then let your defense kind of eat like it did against Arizona State? Because, I mean, yeah, Trenton Bourguet did good, but not great. And Mish Powell made him pay at the end. So I think that's kind of the recipe for success, control the running elements of the quarterback, force them into just being a traditional offense, and then let your defense eat again. Because there's really outside of, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation on this. I know it. but Alec, was it Amor?
We haven't got a pronunciation guide, so I can neither confirm or deny this. Lars's pronunciations are always some of my favorite things to just listen to.
I hate you. The receiver who just victimized Travis Hunter against Colorado, right? Just that the one who was like, what? It was like 200 yards,
294 yards.
Yeah. So so he had 294 yards in that game, and he has 591 yards total this season. So I do some quick math on that. He basically dominated Colorado and has been okay ever since, before and after. So I think it's not necessarily an offense that's going to threaten you. So it's an offense that Washington, especially after Arizona State, should be able to contain pretty well.
No, absolutely. First of all, I see how it is. I see how it is. But second of all, I think that this all starts up front, right? Because we've talked about the defensive line ad nauseum this season, where there are two really talented starters on the edge in Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fatui. But they've combined for 3 of Washington's 7 sacks this season. And after having 38 a year ago, that's a really significant step back. And we got a chance to talk to both of them earlier this week, and they both said, "Yeah, it feels like we're really getting game planned around." Braylon Trice who talked about, seeing a lot of double and triple teams and things like that. Where he said, "Yeah, I expect an opponent's best shot every single week, but there has to be a point where if that's happening, that other people need to win their matchups. Whatever else is going on along the defensive line, those people need to find ways to win their matchups and get into the backfield or just like really anything like that." And we haven't seen a ton of that so far this season. I think that they're all very capable players, especially on the interior. I'm a really big fan of things that Javon Parker's doing. MJ Ollie really has taken some nice steps this year as a defensive tackle, but it needs to be more because it doesn't matter how quick the ball is coming out sometimes. It feels like there's still an opportunity for a play to be made if the pocket can be collapsed just a little bit more.
Right. Well, and to your point, I'm almost thinking, okay, if you know that Braylon Trice is getting game planned around, why not game plan around the game plan? Like, I
Right.
know it kind of sounds easier said than done, right? But why not put Jacob Bandis outside on the edge and line Braylon Trice up the middle and see what happens? Just see how an offense reacts to that. Where I'm not saying you're going to
Sure.
line up Braylon Trice as a defensive tackle, right? But he's going to be a stand up guy stunting on the inside, right? That sort of thing, or start inside, stunt, and go outside. Where Jacob Bandis can push the pile, force him out, and then Braylon can use the speed to get around the edge a little quicker without after the ball is snapped, to where you don't have that initial double team, right? Or once the line
Right.
starts to break down, then you have an opening, right? Because we've seen Zion chase guys around and just miss guys and basically jump the snap count at almost every other snap. So it's not that they're not getting penetration, or not that they're not, there's literally like it's almost like the offense against Arizona State where it's like, okay, there's nothing here. It's like, no, there's plenty there, but the reason why they haven't gotten the sacks is because the combination of, as you pointed out, ball gets out, but then also not taking advantage of opportunities when they're there. So I think in order to create some more opportunities, you might have to get creative, and we've seen Chuck Morrell do 4 edge rushers on the down line. So it's not like we haven't seen it before, but we saw it last season. We haven't seen it as much this season, especially with Voice Newfie moving inside and things like that. So there's
Outside.
or outside, right, from inside to outside, right, to your point,
Yeah.
yes. But that's sort of kind of where they're at, where it's like, okay, but Voy is another guy where as a former interior guy, you can stun him both ways, right? Why not use that versatility to just create different matchups and force the offense into doing something else, right? That's kind of what
Right.
your job is to do, right? If you're not getting home with your traditional 4 or 5, either bring a blitzer, which isn't always the greatest plan, or get creative with your stunts and alignments up front to where you can. I mean, that's what the offense does, right? Where when Penix and those guys motion out, they're finding out, okay, who are we drawing? Do we have man? Do we have zone? Put him up front. Put Braylon Trice up the middle and see what happens. It's like, okay, whoa, wait, what's he doing up the middle? It's like, you got plenty of edge rushers where you can put Voy on one side, Braylon up the middle, next to Thule and MJ, and put Zion at the edge. Yeah, you're sacrificing a DB or whatever, but there's just something that has to change up front from a schematic perspective to get more pressure.
So I'm really glad you pointed that out because one thing that I noticed a lot earlier on in the season that we haven't seen as much recently is Washington would show a lot of double A gap pressure where both linebackers would come down and align on either side of the center. And sometimes one would blitz. There are a whole lot of different things that would happen in that alignment from that formation, but it would confuse quarterbacks a lot and lead to a whole lot of different things. There was some chaos. I don't know if they ever really got like an interception off of that, but it definitely led to a lot of confusion from the opposing offense, and it led to some pressure and it led to some other things. So I'm curious to see if that kind of comes back a little bit. And I'm sure like against Oregon, you can't really do that, especially Oregon and Arizona too, because they have some really good receivers over there. You can't do that necessarily as much because sometimes if you're a little late getting back, that just frees up the middle of the field for just like a quick sit down kind of route. So it's not necessarily something that you can kind of pick and choose your moments as to when to do that. But this is a week to kind of figure that out, where Stanford doesn't necessarily have the best receiving core in this conference. So it's just a little bit more possible to do it at a time like that.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, because Ben Yurosek as a tight. I mean, honestly, that's kind of the biggest matchup is going to be Ben Yurosek and Stanford's tight ends against Washington's linebackers because that's kind of where Stanford eats traditionally, right? I mean, this year is not a traditional Stanford year, but that's also one where Ben was a former UW target at one point or another, when he was coming out of high school. Because I remember covering his recruitment. And with that being said, Ben's always kind of one of those guys where he'll just pop off for a big game every now and then. It just kind of just screams like it could be that game, right? So to your point, if you're bringing pressure or you're doing something else with the linebackers, and then he's able to get behind him, and you don't have that secondary coming down quick enough, it's like, okay, that's where your completions and that's where your big plays come into play. But I think it's a matter of kind of just picking your poison, right? Like when and how do you want to bring that pressure? Because you don't have to do it every down, right? You don't have to be Arizona State and bring 7 and 8 on every pressure. It's like you don't have to do that, but you just got to find a way to mix it up a little more than it has been.
You're saying you don't just run engage 8 every single play when you play Madden? Like that's
I mean, we all had that time of our life at one point or another where you just sent the entire house and yet still somehow got beat on a 50-yard fade route one-on-one coverage against a 5'10" DB. So
happens all the time. And before we move on here, because we're going to get into our bold prediction and then everybody's favorite segment, Lars' score prediction. Before we do that, though, we're going to talk about our friends over at Prize Picks as we get ready for some Thursday night football tonight. And I'm really excited because I would just slam every Josh Allen over, just because as somebody who just hasn't been fantasy football anyways, having on Prize Picks just makes it even more fun because on Prize Picks you can win up to 25 times your money this football season. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Prize Picks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. And Prize Picks, one of the best things about them is they offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select players' projections up 25% to provide even more value. Prize Picks now also offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Do you want to get on the action? You can. It's super easy. Just go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks as daily fantasy sports made easy. All right. Bold prediction time. Do you want to kick us off this week? I can't remember who went first last week. I feel like I say this every single time now. You muted yourself there. That was.
I'm going to defer to you, and I think the mute is indicating of that. Given my picks last week against Arizona State, I'm going to let you set the tempo on this one because I already know my score.
Thank you.
I'm going to tease my score prediction and say I'm going to take the under, or not the under. I'm going to take Stanford plus 26.5. I'm just going to tell you that.
Okay, all right.
My point is I'm just saying Washington's going to win, but it's not going to be by over 20 points. I'll just tell you that right now.
So, all right, well, then I'll start us off. I'm going to go with I'm going to start with Dylan Johnson, 120 yards total. Not just rushing, 120 total yards and 2 touchdowns. I feel like this is one I've used before, but I'm going to go back to the well here because I feel like that's one that can definitely hit where his involvement in the offense has just continued to ramp up, and this might just be another big week for him with everything that, I'm sure Ryan Grubb has planned for the Cardinal.
Yeah, exactly. And see, I mean that you would hope that I really like that one. I really like that because this is a perfect opportunity for Dylan to show everything that he's got because where he doesn't necessarily have to get 100 rushing yards, but it'd be good if it was like 80-40, right? 80 rush, 40 receiving, get a couple of big breaks in there, things like that. Because I mean, really, he has shown his ability as an all-around back, but he just hasn't consistently been able to show it. From play calling, from injuries, from not being fully, 100% at the start of the season, that sort of thing. But he's kind of like right at that perfect time in the season where, hey, now this is when you start to ride Dylan when the offense needs to kind of set the tempo. It's a perfect way to do it. So I will take I'll just continue on with the offensive theme here. I'm going to pick Jalen Polk goes for 130 and 2 touchdowns.
Ooh, okay. So leading receiver, I would assume.
Yeah. Although it's funny because like part of me thinks that like, I mean, here's the thing about Washington, they can still get yards, but not the
For sure.
touchdown. So I think Rome could get like 120 or 110, but he might only get one touchdown or no touchdowns because he had 180 against Michigan State and no touchdowns. So I think it's a matter of which stat do you give him. So I think Jalen
Right.
Polk will be the overall leading receiver, but I think Rome will be kind of right behind him or maybe even ahead of him from a yards perspective, but won't get the touchdowns.
Okay. Interesting. Also, I just want to say thank you for enjoying my Dylan Johnson pick as much as you did. That makes up for when you told me you hate me in the last segment. So it's the balance here on the show that I enjoy personally. So I'm going to stick with the offense, and I think you had the Michael Penix prediction last time, so I'm going to take that one from you this time, and I'm going to be a little bit on the conservative side, and I'm going to say he throws for 350 yards. And I'm gonna stick with 4 touchdowns. I'm gonna go there because I think that at least one of those Dylan Johnson touchdowns would be a receiving one. So let's go 350 and 4 touchdowns because the Stanford defense has been okay. It's been fine, but I think that this offense, especially after what happened last week, they're out there and they want to throw the ball all over the yard. So yeah.
I like that. I can get behind that. So I'm gonna go on the defensive side, and I don't want to go too off the wall with this. So I'm trying to pull up some quick stats here to see how many sacks on average Stanford has allowed. And I know I probably should have done this beforehand, but okay. So Stanford has allowed 25 sacks in 7 games, second most behind Colorado. So what does that tell me? What do the numbers tell me here? That tells me somebody somehow has to eat up front. So I'm going to say Washington as a team gets 4.5 sacks.
4.5.
4.5. Because there's always a half in there somewhere. We're going down to the farm in Nerd Nation. There's always a half in there.
All right, I can get on board with that. I'm gonna do one more offensive one, and I'm going to pull from your tradition here and go with anytime touchdown. And especially if we're going with the limited snap count route, Jalen McMillan, anytime touchdown. I'm just
fair. Yeah,
I'm planting my flag there.
Fair. That's a fair one where it's like he might have 3 catches, 4 targets, but he's gonna have a touchdown. You got to get him back involved in this thing,
Yep.
and somehow, some ways. The key is going to be, is it going to be like an end around rushing touchdown or is it going to be a receiving touchdown?
That's why I said anytime touchdown.
Exactly. That's why we love our anytime touchdown parlay here. So I will exactly. But with that being said, I want to stick back to the defense. Stanford's only thrown 4 interceptions this year, so I'm not sure that the turnover one will be there. I think the sacks will be there as a result instead of the turnovers. But I'm going to say Stanford as an offense gets held to, what's their total offensive numbers here? 360 yards per game. I want to say Washington holds Stanford to under 300 yards per game.
I like that. I like that.
Like, not by a ton, but they're going to get them just enough, maybe like 290, 295. Just done.
I'm going to go back to the defensive side now. Just get a couple in there. First one, this is just kind of an old reliable for me at this point. Edefwani Ulofoshio, leading tackler. I'm going to go 8+.
Okay. That's fair. I think 8 and above is considered leading or bold. Like you don't have to get 12 or 14 to be the leading, to be the bold pick, right? But
I love Eddie, but it's not like Ben Burkervin where he would rack up like 15, 16 tackles a game back in the day.
Well, and the other problem with that is that also kind of signifies your other areas. I mean, not that Ben Burkervin wasn't a sideline guy, but like that also kind of does signify there's some other problems. If your linebacker has like 16 tackles, it means nobody up front was able to get anything done. So, I mean, maybe not. But that's
there were some other things that I think contributed a little bit more, like
no doubt,
his other linebackers around him.
No doubt. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So there's other mitigating factors to where nobody should have 15 or 16 tackles unless you're playing special.
Right.
With that being said, I will do. You want to do one more? Or do you want to go score prediction? Because I think I kind of.
Let's do one more.
Let's do one more. Let's go. Oh boy.
I've got one if you can't think of one.
Yeah, you go for it because I was gonna say Grady Gross 3 field goals, but that's not bold. That's just that's.
I mean, hey, he hit it last week. but hey, shout out to Washington special teams, man. I got an article up on Inside the Huskies. They have a 90.4 grade from PFF. They've been outstanding this season. So I'm gonna just throw a turnover in there because Washington's defense has been good at forcing, and this one's gonna be really, really bold. Okay. Washington recovers their first fumble of the season against Stanford Cardinal.
That I can see. And that'll go with the 4.5 sacks because one of those sacks is going to be a forced fumble that Zion didn't get credit for against Michigan State.
We're working in tandem here. I like it. And now, if I had a drum roll, I'd play the drum roll sound effect. It's time for Lars' score prediction.
So I've been literally going through this for a couple of days now, trying to think what would be an appropriate score prediction because after the Arizona State debacle, I've been pretty good for the most part. I usually get within about 7 to 10 points of both teams, right? The Oregon game, I was like 42-38, and the game was 36-33. So we're in the ballpark, right? We've been there. We've been on the reservation. Then I kind of got off it last week. So this week we are back on the reservation. We are taking Stanford plus 26.5 just because I do not believe that Troy Taylor is going to lose that badly at home. They will still lose, however. Washington 32, Stanford 17.
Okay. All right.
A decent enough margin, right? You're still getting a 2-touchdown victory, but 26, especially after last week. I need to see it before I pick Washington above 21 points again. So
that's fair.
Shout out Ryan Grubb. I believe in you, Ryan Grubb, but I need to see it again. I need to see it.
I think that's a great final thought too for me there. So with that being said, all the everydayers out there, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Lars, thank you for being here. And again, if you're not an everydayer yet, do you know where to go? Because there are tons of places that you can go. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Please feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed the show. Like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review. We really do appreciate all of it. Leave us a comment down in the YouTube section. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you after the game.